Hey there, I am Alan Gratz, and for World Read Aloud Day 2024, I thought I would read to you a short section from my new book, Heroes, which is a story of Pearl Harbor. Okay, so to set up this scene, we're going to start about 30 pages into the book, and my main character's name is Frank McCoy, and he and his best friend, Stanley Summers, are they love hanging out with each other. They're always together. They love making up comic books together and talking about their favorite superheroes and that kind of thing. They both live on Ford Island, which is this island right in the middle of Pearl Harbor, because both of their dads are in the U.S. Navy. And so they live right there where all the battleships are and all the planes land in the middle of Pearl Harbor. And one day, Stanley gets into a fight with some bullies, and Frank doesn't help him out. In fact, Frank turns and runs the other way. He runs away. And Stanley is kind of cheesed off about this. He's like, dude, what happened? Why didn't you back me up? And Frank can't explain to him exactly why. There's more about that in the book, and I won't get into it here about why he ran away, but he has reasons. But he feels really bad about it, and Stanley kind of still feels bad about it, and it drives a wedge in their relationship for the next couple of days. Well, the very next day, the two of them are scheduled to go on a tour of the USS Utah, one of the battleships that is stationed there in Pearl Harbor. Frank's older sister is dating one of the sailors on the Utah, and he's invited Frank and Stanley to go and take a tour. So they're real excited to go on the tour, but there's still a lot of tension between the two friends, Frank and Stanley, but they don't want to miss out on going to tour a battleship because that's cool. So they go, but Frank's still thinking about how he can try to explain things and make up with Stanley, and he's going to try to do that in this section, but then bigger things are going to happen that maybe put all that on the back burner for a minute. So I think that's all the setup that you need for this section. So I'm going to read right from the book here, and I'm going to start at the bottom of page 34 if you want to read along with me. This is, again, page 34 in my new book, Heroes, about Pearl Harbor. Here we go. There's my guys, Brooks Leonard said as we came aboard. Right place, right time. He smiled and shook our hands like we were adults. Brooks had on his white baseball uniform with the word Utah written in cursive on the chest. Not many of the other Utahs were up and about. Amidships, a sailor in white shorts and a white t-shirt sat on an air vent with his legs up on the rail, reading the Sunday comics. Farther aft, the Utah's band had assembled, ready to play the national anthem when the color guard raised the American flag. Despite the tension with Stanley, I felt an electric thrill standing on the deck of a real battleship. It was just so big and solid. Every inch of the Utah was wood and steel. It felt powerful, invincible, like the safest place in the world. I wanted to never leave. Let me give you guys the grand tour, Brooks said, waving for us to follow him. The Utah's a battleship, but an old one. She was decommissioned from fighting after the First World War. She weighs more than 30,000 tons, and from stem to stern, she's about 1.5 football fields long. Freshly scrubbed teak decks stretched out in every direction, and enormous wooden covers shrouded what must have been the Utah's guns. Round gray air vents sprouted from the deck like metal mushrooms, and ropes and chains were coiled everywhere I looked. Hatches and doorways led to stairs and ladders that disappeared into the decks below, and the outside edge of the deck was ringed with rope railings. Brooks explained that the Utah was only used for anti-aircraft gun training and target practice now. We cover the decks with loose lumber, and planes drop dummy bombs on us, he said, putting his hand on a big stack of timbers as thick as tree trunks. These protect the real deck and show the pilots where they hit. He laughed. Pretty funny, huh? I joined the Navy, and the only people shooting at me are the other Navy guys. Stanley was totally focused on what Brooks was saying, but I was still distracted. Stanley was the best friend I'd ever had, and I couldn't bear the thought of him thinking less of me. I had to make things right with him. It was time to tell him why I was the way I was. Brooks asked us to follow him to the rear of the ship, and I saw my chance. "Stanley, I'm sorry about yesterday," I said. Stanley stiffened. "It doesn't matter," he said. "It does to me," I said. "I didn't mean to... You see, a few years ago Dang it. I wasn't saying it the way I wanted to say it. See, back when I lived in Florida, there was this incident," I started, but I didn't get a chance to finish. Because that was the moment the whole world turned upside down. Next chapter is called Meatballs. "Whoa, look at all those planes," a sailor on deck cried. Stanley and Brooks and I turned around. Coming in low from the northwest, from the direction of Pearl City, was a whole squadron of fighters. Dozens of them, broken up into flights of 4 planes each. I could hear the buzz of their engines echoing across the water. "That's weird," said Brooks. "The carriers send planes in for tune-ups on Ford, but never that many at once." Boom! The sound made us all jump, and Stanley and I raced to the starboard side of the ship. A fiery explosion erupted on the south end of Ford Island, and I gasped. That was near the seaplane ramp. 8 or 9 planes dove and circled in the air above the explosion, and I flinched as there was another boom, and another, and another. A hard, tightening knot grew in my stomach as black smoke and flames rose from the island. Something about this was not right. Brooks and a few other sailors came over to watch with us, but they didn't seem troubled. "Maneuvers? On a Sunday?" a sailor said. "What are those papayas at headquarters thinking?" "Of all the damn times to have a drill," said another. It was true that the Army and Navy ran exercises like this all the time, with fake bomb explosions and anti-aircraft guns firing blanks as planes buzzed the airfields and docks. But something about this all felt off, and it just wasn't the timing. "Look at those. Those look like real bombs they're dropping," I said. "No," said Brooks, "they would never." "They hit the water tower," Stanley cried. I turned to see flames explode up from the base of Ford Island's water tower, and we all gasped as it toppled to the ground. "Oh, somebody's going to catch hell for that," said one of the sailors. "This is the best damn drill the Army's ever put on," Brooks said with a grin. He was right, if it was a drill. The sound of droning planes drowned out the Utah band playing the national anthem, and the back of my neck tingled. This didn't feel like a drill, but what else could it be? Suddenly, one of the planes pulled out of its bombing dive and zoomed right toward us. It buzzed the Utah's conning tower, flashing by so close and so fast that everyone ducked. Stanley waved to it, like we always did to the pilots flying around Pearl, but I didn't. I was too busy trying to see the markings on the underside of the airplane's wings. A shiver ran through me, and I grabbed Stanley's arm. "Stanley, come on," I yelled over the sound of more explosions, pulling him back to the port side of the ship. "What is it?" he said. "Those planes," I said. "I think I saw a meatball." "A meatball?" Stanley cried. We ran to the rail, where the sailor who'd been reading the funny papers stood staring. More planes filled the air, swooping and diving and dropping more bombs. A geyser of water shot up across the harbor and splashed down. I couldn't believe what was happening. Another plane buzzed by so close we almost could have touched it, and I grabbed Stanley's arm again and pointed. There, painted on the bottom of the plane's wings, were the meatballs I thought I'd seen before. The round red circles that formed the rising sun of the Japanese flag. "Stanley, it's not a drill," I yelled in his ears. "It's a Japanese attack." That's the end of the chapter and the end of that section. And what happens next, you'll have to read about that in Heroes, my new book about Pearl Harbor. Thanks for listening. Thanks for reading. Have a great year.